In this video, I'm going to share how you guys can hit upwards on the driver correctly. Now, I think a lot of people have a good understanding that they have to hit upwards on it, but they may not have the right idea of which body parts to move or which movements are involved more. So if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button. And if you are new to the channel, please subscribe because that'll really help me to create more videos like this for you guys. Now let's get started. So when most people hit the driver, they kind of know that they have to hit up on it because the ball's teed up off the ground. But they tend to use like their wrists, or they don't kind of bend their body correctly. They shouldn't be using or moving their wrists differently at all. But from the face-on view, the first kind of thing I want to explain to you guys is just some common mistakes. And then I'll kind of show you kind of how to do it correctly or what movements are involved to allow you to hit up on it without manipulating the wrist too much. So from the face-on view, when I have my body positioned for a driver, you can see that the ball position is typically more forward in the stance, my head position is further behind, and my stance is wider, okay? Now, more specifically, you want to make sure that the ball position is kind of in line with the lead shoulder, okay? A very general rule that people think about is that the ball is kind of like just inside of the left foot, but that's not really specific enough, okay? It has to be in line with the lead shoulder, only because we want to make sure that when you strike the ball, that your left arm in the shaft is pretty much in a straight line at impact, okay? So if the ball position was too far back, most people would hit the ball with too much shaft lean, right? And they would kind of hit it more like an iron and start to hit downwards on it. And if the ball is too far forward, then people will actually start to swing more across the golf ball or start to get their wrists a bit more active and lean the shaft more backwards, okay? So it's important that you get the ball position in line with that lead shoulder after you set up your body, okay? But when it comes to hitting upwards on the golf ball, the most common thing or the most logical thing that comes to mind for most people is that they just want to keep their weight on their trail side for too long through impact, okay? And for a lot of people, I can see why that would make sense, okay? Because you want to swing up on it and you need to keep your body and everything more behind it. Which is true, but you don't need to have your weight stuck on your right foot, like not the vast majority of your weight at least. The problem with keeping too much of your weight on your trail foot is that it will sacrifice your ability to swing the club in the right path. I know in past videos I've talked about this before, but the more weight that you keep on your trail foot, you'll stay behind it, but you'll tend to like open up your body more and you'll swing like over and across the golf ball to the left. So just from the side view so you can see it, when I get to the top, if I swing down and I keep all my weight on my right foot, you can see that I'll start to spin out. My hands will kind of get in front of me. The club head will kind of swing out in front and I'll deliver the club from outside and across it left, okay? So the more that you do that as well, you'll also tend to swing less up on it. You'll tend to swing more downwards as well. The correct thing to do with a driver is you have to make sure that your hips will still go forward, okay? You still want your hips to go ahead of your chest, but you want to make sure that you bend backwards, okay? What people don't realize is that their starting position with the head is further to the right of the ball, all right? So that means when you turn to the top, your head's more to the right. Typically, if you were to draw like a straight line up from the ball, when I take it back, you don't want like your head right up against that line, okay? Not with driver. Because you're starting more to the right, when you turn, you should typically see a little bit more of a space between your upper back and that ball line. That shows you that your head's staying to the right. And then when you come down with it, you can see that my hips are still going left. I'm still feeling like my weight kind of moves a little bit more to my lead side, but you can see how my body's bending differently. My head is kind of tilting more to the right, my body's bending to the trail side. So that way, when I come in, I can still extend out the longest point more so right at the ball without having to try to flip the club or kind of stay really far behind it with my hips and my weight. So you can kind of see, if I just take some practice swings, if I stayed right on top of it and I didn't really bend my body, I can't really swing upwards on it very well. I have to use my wrists. So if you keep your weight on your right foot, you can kind of see I'll have a trouble reaching for the golf ball. So I'll have to swing more over and across it to catch the ball, right? And that's going to make it really difficult for you to control the direction as well, okay? So just remember that You still want the weight to go left, but you have to make sure that your body bends so that your head stays behind the golf ball enough. So you can still see my hips are forward, my chest is kind of behind my belt, okay? And when I'm doing that, then I can actually get my radius to extend out kind of near impact a bit more. So mistake number 2 now with the driver, for when people try to swing upwards on the golf ball, they actually try to pull their arms, or they pull the grip closer towards them, because when they're getting closer into impact, they can already kind of feel like the club is too far extended out, or that it's going to drive into the ground too much. And again, it's related to where your head is positioned relative to the ball, or if your weight is really far back on the right foot, again, you're probably going to hit the ground really far behind the golf ball unless you do something to kind of shorten out the longest point. So that'll come in the form of you either pulling the arms up or pulling the grip upwards. You're going to add a lot of extension to the wrist, okay? Or you'll have to swing over the top to move the low point further forward. But in most cases, most people are still kind of too much on top of the golf ball with driver. So when they come in, they feel like they're going to swing downwards on it, and they kind of shrug their shoulders and pull the grip up like this, okay? And that's going to basically shorten out the radius just enough to where they kind of miss the ground and then maybe catch the ball a little bit. But when a player does that, they have a really difficult time, not only with contact, because they can either hit the ground early if they don't pull up enough, and if they pull up too much, then they'll hit the top. But besides the contact, they'll also struggle with club face control, because when the arms pull up and the arms bend, there's a lot of movement in the club face because the hands and wrists are really active. Again, this is all kind of related to kind of how your body bends, but if you do things correctly with the body, you should be able to keep this lead arm straight without any issue, okay? Just so you guys know what all the mistakes are now, I'm just gonna go over things from the face-on view and just gonna go over the movement a bit more in detail, and just go over certain positions or body parts to look out for the next time you guys analyze yourself. So when explaining the movement, I usually kind of get people to focus on the position of the lead shoulder, okay? So if I were to step to this ball and there was a circle drawn right where my lead shoulder is, now, when I get to the top of the backswing, obviously, again, like I was saying before, my head has to stay to the right, okay? When I come in, you'll notice that if my body is bending correctly, my hips are going forward, my head is staying back, my body's bending to the trail side, relative to where it started at address, you'll notice that my lead shoulder actually starts to move more up. So if you're trying to keep your lead arm straight, remember, we don't want this to bend. Okay, we don't want to have to bend this to kind of pull the club upwards, okay, like from this way. But if we were to bend ourselves and keep the lead arm straight and that lead shoulder moves upwards higher than where it was at address, then that'll basically kind of like shorten out the length of the longest point enough to where it doesn't touch the ground, okay? Now with an iron, right, usually that lead shoulder will actually just be a bit more level or a bit more in front of where it was relative to address. So if I was hitting an iron here, and that same circle is on my shoulder, if I get to the top and I come down, by the time I strike it, my lead shoulder is already a little bit more in front of where it was. That way, when I extend out the radius, or the longest point, it forms more so after the golf ball, okay? And that would signify that I've hit downwards on it. But with driver, that lead shoulder doesn't go more forward or isn't positioned more forward. It is positioned more kind of upwards, okay? Just because of how much more my body's bent to the right. So that's the really good visual that not a lot of people think about. When they think about weight shift and staying behind it, stuff like that, they just keep their entire bodies behind it, or they just kind of treat it like an iron and then just trying to they struggle with feeling like really cramped here because they're just pulling the grip closer towards them, okay? But I'm just trying to tell you guys that you can keep the length of your lead arm the same, but if you were to bend correctly, you can kind of see I don't touch the ground. I'm not touching the ground because my lead shoulder, as I'm bending my body, is moving more upwards and around me. So that's a really important thing to think about that'll encourage you to get your hips to still go forward enough and your body to bend enough like this so that your club doesn't reach the ground. If that lead shoulder was staying level, then yes, you can see that my driver now touches the ground. Okay, but if it goes upwards, then I don't touch the ground anymore. And just to add one more point, okay, now that I'm just talking about the position of this lead shoulder. So again, if you are a player that kind of keeps their entire bodies too far on the trail side, again, if I were to draw that circle at my address position, if I were to do that, keep my whole body, you can see that my lead shoulder is actually further behind where it started. If it's further behind, then when I do extend out the radius, it's going to be really far behind the golf ball. That's probably, again, where I'm going to hit the golf ball or hit the ground. Now, that'll either force me to have to, again, pull up on the shaft, right, to shorten out the radius so I don't touch the ground, or I have to swing more outside and across to get the club steep enough to come in so that the move's a low point further forward. That's how the position of this lead shoulder can affect, your ability to hit the ground in the right place or avoid the ground and hit up on the driver correctly, okay? So just remember that lead shoulder has to stay kind of in line with the ball, but it'll just kind of move more up. You don't want that lead shoulder to stay behind where it started, or you don't want it to be more in front of where it started with driver. So it should stay right in line with the ball. But remember, if your hips are going forward and everything goes up, then you should be able to keep this straight without touching the ground. Okay, so a really great drill that you guys can do, just using your driver head cover or any head cover that you have, is you can place it pretty much like 1.5 feet in front of the golf ball. You can see how I placed it there. That's there just because if you were to hit downwards on it, you're gonna obviously touch that. If you were to hit up on it enough or hit up on it correctly, you should be able to avoid hitting that head cover. So now, when I'm going to hit this golf ball, you don't have to do any kind of full swings, things like that. But when I'm going to hit it, I'm obviously thinking about, in my backswing, my head kind of stays to the right of the ball. When I'm coming down into impact, my hip feels like it still goes forward, but my body is kind of bending back. So if I were to just use my left arm, remember, I shouldn't have to bend my lead arm at all. Okay, so I'm still thinking about my lead shoulder kind of moving more upwards, okay? It's not moving behind and up. It's not moving forward, okay, because then I'm gonna hit down on it, okay? I wanna keep it in line with the ball, but then it's kind of gonna move up just a little bit, just enough to avoid the ground. So you can do very small swings to start, just like how I'm doing right here. So when I'm hitting, you can kind of go, right? You can kind of see I didn't have to bend this arm. I avoided that head cover successfully, right? And I bent my body. I was really conscious about that, feeling like my lead shoulder kind of moves up, okay? So you can hit a few shots like that. Just do it very slowly to start off. And then you can kind of add a bit more speed to it until you can do it with a full swing. So I'm gonna hit a few shots with a full swing and just see how I do. So I'm just gonna hit a couple really small first, just to show you guys how you should be practicing it. But I'm basically just chipping the driver, just focusing on my body movement to start. So I'm going back. Okay, I'm feeling like my body's bent. Can I do that a couple times? And once you do get comfortable, then, you can try to apply it with a full swing. So if you do things correctly, you shouldn't touch that head cover. If you could do that successfully, then that probably means that you're hitting up on it enough. You shouldn't have to stay way behind it to hit up on it, or you don't have to use your wrist so excessively. Thank you guys so much for watching. Now, if you have any questions at all, you can leave a comment down below. Be sure to follow me on my Instagram at Jonathan K. Moss. And other than that, I'll see you guys on the next video.